Welcome to the Resilience Podcast. I'm Brad Hook and I'm joined by Dr. Sven Hansen. Welcome back.
G'day, everyone.
This week we're looking at name, tame, and reframe. We touched on this in the last podcast, so if anyone would like to explore that, it's very useful in terms of the physiology of what we're talking about. But what's the importance of being able to name, tame, and reframe our emotions?
Fantastic. So look, we're going to experiment with doing something slightly shorter, more practical, and we're maybe asking each other some questions just to get some ideas of how we do it. As I see this sort of thing, you can look at anything. So we talked about situations in life where you can make or break your life, and the physiological element, as Brad described it. Do we freeze? Do we flight? Do we fight? We look at the same idea, but from the perspective of emotional intelligence, which really is only 25 years old, but has shown to be one of the most important parts of the resilience journey. So originally labeled by people like Seligman and Rivett-Choate as emotion regulation, it was found to be one of the factors that correlated best with sustained resilience. Mm-hmm. All right, so what we're going to go through, just really quickly look at what does naming an emotion mean? What does taming an emotion mean? And how do you reframe it? And this is not an easy thing to do. So we're going to keep the content really, really, really simple. And I think, it's, and Brad raised this in the last session, it's very easy to say, keep emotion out of it. I mean, when do you do that, Brad? It's a matter of interest. When do you actually realize you have to keep emotion out of it?
It's an ongoing challenge, and I don't think it's possible because emotions are important signals to take action, to move through our environment, to respond to challenge.
Yeah, you can see Brad is well trained, right? So some people will leave at that and find all kinds of justifications to keep emotions out of it. I think, if you look at a modern neurobiological framework, what Brad says is 100% right. It's an essential signal. And, if we think about emotional intelligence, and this is not the purpose of today, but you think of it as sort of two core practices. One, I see my emotions, important signal. Two, I can work with my emotions, very personal and internal. And then the more social elements of emotional intelligence, and we've covered this as insight and mastery, the ability to see other people's emotions, empathy, and influence or leadership, the ability to work with others just as we work with our own. So in a nutshell, today is about self-leadership. Right? And I think, something that's really, really important for all of us to take time to understand in ourselves, in a way that's relevant to ourselves, is, to kind of get the sense that emotion is power. The fundamental drive of emotion, and you'll see this in the last session, is it moves us. So when I freeze, I literally crumple. I move into the smallest, most submissive, most unbreakable, hopeless self. In fear, run away. And in anger, I come in fighting. That's movement. All right. So if we can start to respect, as Brad is saying, this is a critical signal, one. Two, it will drive your life. So everything, from our health. If we let anger fester, we destroy our immune systems. If we let sadness fester, we have a whole raft of problems that come along with depression. Anxiety, not a good thing, right? So if you can direct those emotions, you open the door to a much better life, to health, to healing, to feeling good, to enjoyment of things, motivation, and the kind of perseverance that gets us to results. Right, so that's kind of just session one. This is such a powerful force or fuel for human beings. We must get to know it. So, and we said this, the second you name it, and this kind of step one is just simply taking emotion from unconscious but present, as you say, Brad, and how do you name it? Because when you give emotion a name, it becomes conscious and you just switched on the lights of emotional intelligence. And we said, I see it, 50% chance of managing it.
Yes.
I don't see it, 96% chance you can't manage it. So if you can make that, name it, that's frustration. So how do you do that, Brad? I mean, if you were to suggest some practical things that you've picked up on your journey.
Well, I think recognizing the signal, as you say, is the first step. And for me, it's usually in the body. You feel yourself heating up, or you feel your palms becoming sweaty, and that's a great signal for me. And I go, interesting. So what emotion correlates with that feeling, that sensation in my body? Oh, frustration, right?
Yeah.
Lots of input coming in through various channels, and things not moving as fast as I would like them. So that's something that I would notice in real time. Name it.
Yeah, I'm spot on, And I think, maybe there's a little bit of flex for people. Some of us will feel it in the body, as you describe, and can be quite, precise about feeling the heat or the heartbeat.
Yeah.
So those are more physically oriented people. Other people might feel a really strong feeling, of lightness or heaviness or
Yes.
grief, and they don't really feel the physical signal. They don't feel a heart, for example, but they acutely feel the emotion.
Yes.
And there are other people who notice that their mind gets involved.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, we are open to it, but that ability to keep asking yourself a question, what is this? And describe it. And as you get better and better at that, this is a threshold for real change, for happiness, for leadership. And it's a long journey, right? And of course, for those of you who are parents on this, the sooner you can start with your kids, the better, I mean, it's not a tragedy, but I mean, the truth is I really only got a grasp of this at the age of 45. It's a bit late, actually. I was ready for this information at 15.
Yes.
If someone had been able to put it across to me, we didn't really have the tools in those days, but I think it would have been a life-changing experience. It certainly was a life-changing experience, even in my mid-40s.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool.
Do you have any habits, Brad? I mean, anything you do on a regular basis just to help you name it?
To help me name it. I think it's just tuning in for me, I'm far more physical. I notice changes in my physiology, heart rate, before potentially thoughts. I can soldier on for long periods of time without noticing that I'm in a state of anxiety or similar. So the practices for me are mostly involving the body. Take a break. It's incredible what 5 minutes, what a difference it can make in the midst of intensity. Those are the kinds of practices that I implement, trying to ensure that I'm in a state of calm, all of the things we talked about last week.
Yeah. And of course, remembering our spiral, when we go down, that capacity to see yourself when you don't sleep,
Yeah,
you're breathing too fast, you can't name it, right? Doors are closed. So we do need our foundations that we discovered, but step one, if we can understand emotion as power, give it a name. And in order to be honest with people, it takes some time.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to go to www.pauleckman.com and learn about the facial expressions. Cambridge, that's some really interesting area. A lot of that is free, but actually learn to name the core different emotions. That's anger. That's my sadness. That's what I feel like when I'm afraid. Whether you name it with a physical or emotional or mental tag doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
The trick is to recognize it.
And do you think it's worthwhile getting better and better at naming specific emotional states? For example, not just I am angry, I am feeling frustrated because of this event. Suddenly I find that opens up a whole lot more options.
Yeah, it's spot on, right? And if you can take that one bit further and say, so what out of 10 am I scoring on this frustration? Is this 2 out of 10 frustration, or do I want to dial it up to 9 out of 10 frustration? That's very powerful and very specific naming, because the second you ask the question, of course, you've got control of the accelerator.
Exactly.
Which means you've gone to the second point, which is tame it. And we've covered this, right? We need to be able to recognize those moments in life that will make a difference. In the moment, without freeze, flight, and fight, to be able to stop and realize there's a taming required. Whether you exhale, whether you relax your face, whether you take a moment, sip on some water, you just take a moment to let that emotion come under your control bit, right? To slow the accelerator, stop feeding it fuel. Really, the point of that is simply so that you can start to feel properly and think properly and behave properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third step in this, is firmly and squarely in this sort of what Brad, right at the beginning, you talked about positivity, emotion regulation. Somebody can call it emotional combat. Last week, we talked about the difference, maybe like, muscle metaphor. That's all the reframe is. Now, this is harder work because it feels very unnatural. So let's say I am angry about something. Everything in my anger tunnel visions me to want to destroy the object that's frustrating me. And anger is very compelling. Remember, it's moving you hard and fast to a target that you want to obliterate. That's what's going on. And yes, frustration is like a mild anger, and screaming rage and violence is the other end of anger. But they're all part of the primary emotion of anger.
Yeah.
So when that anger is moving you down the barrel of the gun, quite literally, that's what it does to your thinking. It does to your awareness. You simply can't see what else is going on. So to ask someone to then reframe it is a big ask. Tricky, right? Because the state of anger obliterates the conception of an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
The core idea here is that, just like a gymnast needs well-trained muscles on both sides of any joint, in the same way, if there's anger, there must be a counter or an antagonist. And, we kind of mentioned these very simply, and here's very important, that each of us come up with the right language.
Yeah.
So when you feel and you notice the heat, the heart rate, the tension, the face of anger, where do you need to head to? What little flame of a countering emotion could you activate?
Yes.
I think, you mentioned, we talked earlier, about patience. Space is really important. Technically, I would put that in the tame it.
Yes.
Because I think you want to sort of tame it so that the barrel of the gun gets a bit shorter and a bit wider and you can see around you a bit more. Mm. So in that taming, you start to open your creativity. And then the job for us in reframing it is to work out, okay, where's another perspective?
That's right.
So, I'm angry. I just want to get that out of the way. If I can tame it and I come around and say, actually, I wonder how they've seen this situation. Well, it's really interesting because just in that step, I've validated the existence of another person. Anger tries to counter that. Right? Anger is trying to help you kill that person. So you don't want to validate their existence. But you just swing around to say, okay, I wonder how this looks from their point of view. You have acknowledged another human being. I call that basic respect. So when Jacinda Ardern says, you need to be kind, well, some of us can get a little antsy about that. But if someone says to me, look, I know they're different, but let's respect them and the struggles they've got and, where they are. They're also human beings. Okay, I got that. I can do that. I can do tolerance. And maybe I need to spend some time just respecting people, being a bit more tolerant, extending that patience you describe into tolerance. And then eventually I start to get to the point that I can really start to say, hey, wow, yeah, that's a pretty hectic situation those people are. I feel for them. Now that technically is compassion. I feel for them. All right, I'm not actually doing anything, but I'm feeling their pain. Mm-hmm. It's the foundation of the Christian or Buddhist or all the great religions have that sense of compassion.
Absolutely.
Now, it's quite another step to actually move to altruism, which is now not just feeling for another person, but actually swinging around there and saying, how can I help? And before you just throw yourself into it, to actually really ask, I wonder what would be the most helpful thing to do for that person. That is constructive compassion, or I prefer to call that altruism, where you take definitive action. All right, so you don't really need to go from anger to love and kindness. There are some alternatives. And I think it's the same as we discussed last time, fear. So I hunt curiosity. I mean, if you feel fear, where do you go, Brad?
Well, as you said, it's similar to anger. The world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You're really just looking for an escape, a way out,
Mm.
disconnecting
So
from
what's your
whatever.
counter? What are you hunting for when you feel that I've got to get
Yeah.
out of here?
Again, in my case, it's that calm. Open up the empathy portal, look around. Go, is this really as bad as it seems? How's the other person doing? What's going on in my environment? What can I actually control right now in the moment, as opposed to all of these things that potentially are
Yeah,
abstract,
dead
right?
right. Yeah, it's a
And
tricky one. And I guess, for many of our clients and listeners, anxiety is a big concern. And, right at the moment, if you look at how Auckland responded to the most recent lockdown, there's a lot of fear around.
yeah,
We're living in a culture, Stuart Taylor from our Australian team often talks about this culture of fear. It's not great, right? Because it really prevents us from dealing with the here and now.
yeah,
It prevents us from forming a strong base. When you close down an economy in a panic, oh, I'm saving lives. Yes, true. And I hear you and I respect that point of view, playing it up rather than getting angry. But it stops the whole economy, right? So that sort of has a concertina effect down for months of
yeah.
billions of dollars. We have to be very careful. And so for everyone, and I know it's true for myself, anxiety is one I just need to be a little alert to.
And how do you counter that one? I just remember in a workshop, someone said to me, I'm so anxious about my anxiety. This is
Yeah,
not going to help anyone, really. That's not a
indeed.
good place to be. So how would you counter that?
Yeah. So, this is the practical stuff, and we kind of wrap here and I leave these questions with people to work on. But, there's a great creative opportunity in Reframe. So I think, the emotional intelligence one, name it.
Mm.
If you don't do that, well, you're going to make your life more difficult. Simple. Two, tame it. We all got to find a way to exhale, relax face, check
Mhm.
posture, walk around, have a cup of tea, whatever it might be, right? You have a tame it technique, period. If you don't do that, you're going to do stuff you regret. Three is where there's a lot of creativity. So to be too prescriptive. So, for example, I've teased people a lot about this. It's a 20-year-old technique, right? That if you put a chopstick in your mouth like this, there you go, and you talk like this for
Very
2
good.
minutes.
A much better way of living.
Indeed. You will find yourself laughing and happy, and
Yeah.
everyone around you will be laughing.
Mhm.
Why? Because you've countered the grimness, the sadness, the tiredness with a fake smile. Now, the brain is not stupid, right? So it's scanning all the time, says, oh, she's smiling. Well, something must be good. And
Exactly.
happiness starts to feed on the expression or the physical state of the muscles of your face.
Yeah.
Then the hormones are running. Then your thinking starts to change. So, so why wouldn't we all not have one of these in our car or in the bus or in our bag and on the way to
Absolutely.
work or between meetings? Well, we know it works. The science has been around, in fact, for 25 years now, in this case, and is confirmed again and again and again.
Mm.
From the anxiety one, I think there are simple, here will be my practice tips. One, do your breathing. And as we said in the breathing one, slow your breathing.
Yes.
That alone will bring that vagus nerve into action. It'll bring the calming effect, and it directly counters anxiety. To the sleep, which you've talked about. When you get a good night's sleep, particularly when you finish your dreaming module,
Yes.
later part of the night, you will counter your anxiety. Three, I think the ability to come into the present, which you described, deal with what's here now, not all your worries. You can talk about those worry, control, presence, and we'll come back to this idea, but how do you bring yourself 100% into the thing you're dealing with now? When you do that, anxiety just fades. Right, so it's a little bit of a cognitive shift.
It
You're
is.
forcing your mind not to worry about all those things out there. You're
Mhm.
forcing it into the moment. And as all your attention comes into the moment, there's no energy left to worry, because remember, worry is incredibly expensive. Anyone who's lain awake for 2-3 hours and worried about something, it's absolutely exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And many people are doing this night after night after night. All right. So in that case, you may be wanting to say, well, okay, I've got my worries. How do I come present to my breath? And just use that control of one thing. That works. As I shared it last time, I find curiosity.
Yes.
I think that's superpower, when I can genuinely say, that doesn't feel good. You feel anxious about something. And then to be able to step on my curiosity muscle when I can remember, it changes the whole game. I become playful. I can laugh at myself. Suddenly I'm being more creative with how I think through things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, that's my sense is we should all try different things,
Yeah, I've heard some young people talk about how they will try and reframe the current situation in the context of it being a video game. Yeah, this is just a little challenge on the journey, and it's going to be okay.
Yes.
How can I bypass this? Calm myself down. Which powers can I activate? And I think that playfulness is really important, because if I can step back, have a laugh, and go, "Oh, that's Brad feeling angry," or "That's Brad feeling sad," I can have a little laugh, step back, and go, "Well, what should I get on with?"
Yeah. And Kerry Evans, the psychiatrist who coached the All Blacks for many years, he articulates it very well in his book, How to Perform. I forget what he called it, but he describes, the need to, ultimately when you face a challenge, you want to step into it. So, maybe we should finish as you stepping into the emotion. But sometimes it's too strong. So he talks about stepping back, as you just described, and then stepping up to get that curiosity, playfulness, and then to remember to step back in. I think that's quite clever, right? So he's teaching the athletes to do this in moments of a game, to be able to pause, check, name it, step back, tame it, get up, reframe it, get back in and do the job. Nice, clever, right? And, it gives us a nice sort of routine to practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that a lot. So some reframes for sadness, for example. Yep.
Not kidding. And, there are others though, and we get a lot of feedback from people, the 3 blessings exercise.
Yeah.
Which is where you lie in bed, and as you go to bed, you slow your breathing down. And with each exhale, you just say, you know what? I got a roof over my head. You know what? Kids well. You know what? Actually, I'm doing some pretty interesting work compared to a lot of people. So you feel appreciation.
Yeah.
Another very practical one for sadness, and there's quite a lot being written on this at the moment. And, the book Lost Connections, we often talk about getting out in nature. Nature is a massive healing effect on humans, particularly where you've got the multi-sensory, you've got the green and blues, you've got the bird life, you've got the smells.
Yeah.
They all add together, right?
I think that's great. Some really practical tips. Name it, tame it, give yourself some space, and then re-engage, lean back in.
And, take away your video game metaphor. This is a game.
Yeah.
Trouble is the game is your life.
That's
so you may as well play it, right? Instead of just repeating the same boring scene of anxiety, anger, or sadness over and over and over again, right? Because that is insanity.
That is.
And what we're talking about, name it, tame it, reframe it, is how to get out of insanity and play the game of your life. Get good.
I love it. Level up and enjoy the
Indeed,
challenge.
yes.
That's a great place to finish this week's podcast. We look forward to seeing you all next week. And until then, all the best.
Thank you, Brad. Cheers, guys.